Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of First Kings. Today we're in First Kings chapter 15. Now there are going to be four kings that are going to be discussed here in this chapter, two of them kings of Judah, and two of them kings of Israel. And yet this isn't a very long chapter, and so there's not a great deal that is going to be stated about any of them. There's just a paragraph or two for each one. So, what can we learn from these individuals, and what can we see that's going to help us understand things that transpire? Let's look at a couple of things. I want us to begin with Asa. And Asa is the second king under discussion. You have Abijam that is going to be the first one. Abijam is the son of Rehoboam, so he's the grandson of Solomon. And yet he is only going to reign for a couple of years. But then Asa is going to take the throne, and the statement made concerning Asa in verses 10 and 11 is very important because it says that Asa did what was right in the sight of God. Now, that is going to be a statement that you're not going to read very often when it comes to the kings of Israel and Judah. As a matter of fact, you're only going to read that particular phrase about 8 times over the course of the studies of Israel and Judah. There weren't a lot of kings that God considered to be good. It doesn't matter what the people thought or what the nations round about them thought. This is purely from the perspective of God's mentality of what they did. Whether they were ones who were interested in doing what was right and in keeping His commandments or not. It's not about their political prowess. It is not about whether or not they were economically stable or any of those things. It is solely about whether or not they were ones who did what was right in the sight of the Lord. Asa is going to be the first one since the divided kingdom who is going to be described as a king who was good. And he's going to reign for 4 decades in Judah. 41 years he is going to be on the throne. And yet, in 1 Kings, the amount of time that we get to spend with Asa is just a couple of paragraphs. And the first paragraph is about how it is that he went through and cleansed the land of all of the things that had been allowed to be placed there in worship to other gods, and even deposed his own grandmother because of her idolatry. And yet, at the same time, he is also going to be one who is going to be a very shrewd ruler. And that's the second thing that we notice here in this chapter. When Asa is going to go to the king of Syria, he is going to bring out this particular alliance with the king of Syria against the northern kingdom of Israel. And it's going to be because Baasha, who is the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, even though we're not going to read about him taking the throne until the end of the chapter, Baasha is going to be one who is going to be trying to gain a foothold toward Judah. Asa is going to work to stop that. But I want you to notice what he's going to have to do in order to accomplish that task. It is stated in verse 18 that he took all the silver and gold that was left in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the treasuries of the king's house and gave them to his servants to give to the king of Syria. If Asa is having to completely empty out the storehouses of all of the major wealth and goods of that type, then Israel, or the kingdom of Judah rather, has greatly fallen. And it shows where the failures have been over the times of Rehoboam and Abijam. That Asa is truly having to empty out the treasures of Judah in order to be able to secure an alliance with a king to the north to put enough pressure on Israel so that they will not continue to attack. Things are not the same as they were in the days of David and Solomon. The kingdom of Judah is much weaker. Remember that the northern kingdom of Israel is going to have 10 tribes within it. The southern kingdom of Judah is only going to be comprised of two, Judah and Benjamin. And so you're going to have a very different dynamic. And you're not going to have as many men available. You are not going to have as large of an army. You're not going to have as large of a workforce. And you're not going to have as large of a capacity to accumulate and to acquire wealth. Everything is not well in the kingdom of Judah, even with a good king on the throne. And yet Asa is going to do everything that he can to put things at their best possible situation. The last area I want us to look at is down at the end of chapter 15. And that is where the prophecy to Jeroboam is going to be fulfilled. If you recall a couple chapters ago, the prophecy is going to be given that Jeroboam's line is going to be cut off, that Jeroboam's family will not continue as the rulers of Israel, even though God had made the promise back in chapter 11 that if Jeroboam would be faithful, his family would be established as the rulers of Israel. And yet they haven't been faithful. They've been anything but faithful. And so Baasha is going to claim the throne for himself. At the end of chapter 15, and verse 29 says, "It was so when he became king, he killed all the house of Jeroboam. He did not leave to Jeroboam anyone that breathed until he had destroyed him according to the word of the Lord, which he had spoken by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite." You have here God's prophecy of what would happen to Jeroboam's family and Jeroboam's kingdom being fulfilled. Baasha is going to forcibly remove the kingdom from the hands of Jeroboam's family. And he is going to then make sure that Jeroboam's family cannot come back to reclaim the throne. God stated that something was going to happen. And it's not going to be too long later when exactly what he said is going to come to pass yet again. And so we see here in chapter 15 that there's a sense in which God's promises are fulfilled to both Israel and Judah, because Asa is going to come to the throne in fulfillment to the promise of David that his line is going to continue and that his family will be on the throne continuously as long as the kingdom of Judah exists. And yet at the same time, the promise to Jeroboam is also fulfilled, that his family would no longer retain that place and position. These are some of the things that I see when I look at 1 Kings chapter 15. One final note before we close. One of the things that you have to notice in chapter 15 and several other places is that not everything is given in chronological order here. You have Baasha being mentioned as being the enemy of Asa half a chapter before Asa, or before Baasha is actually going to be described as taking the throne. It's because the two are going to reign at the same time period, even though the information about how Baasha is going to get to the throne isn't going to come until later in the chapter. So there's going to be some continuity issues in the giving of the storyline that's not going to follow completely chronologically. And you have to kind of puzzle some of those things together in the way it's being advanced. I hope these things have been beneficial to you. Next time we'll come back and we'll begin looking at 1 Kings chapter 16. But until then, have a great day.